sound check or
Sure.
whatever those words that mean things.
That works for me. All right. You need me to talk?
Sure.
All right. I'm talking.
Sound check or
Sure.
whatever those words that mean things.
That works for me. All right. You need me to talk?
Sure.
All right. I'm talking.
Sound check or had to bump your volume up just a little bit, but it's good to go.
Okay.
So I was gonna spend a few minutes complaining about my wife, but I've already started the broadcast. I can't do that now.
Oh, you're in trouble now.
Yeah. It's just, it's fine. I'll put it out there because it's nothing I wouldn't say to her face. She had to go to a thing at church tonight, and she was leaving, with 0 seconds to spare as she lives her life. And she comes in and says, I got a flat tire on the van. And I said, okay, take my truck and go. And she looked at me like, well, that's not the solution to the flat tire. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you about that, but you don't want to be late for your thing. Take the truck. Being late for the thing won't fix the tire. Let's just deal with one problem at a time. So it was just, I think women, not all women. Yeah, I'm going to say it, all women. I think they judge their men on whether or not they panic with them. If your man won't panic with you, clearly he doesn't love you.
Oh, man. Yeah, I can relate to this.
Yeah.
I mean, husband and father of a daughter. I can completely relate.
So, I'm sitting there on the couch watching Netflix, and it's like I was kind of going to finish my show, but that's all right. I'll get up and deal with it, But it's the I didn't panic with her immediately in the moment. So I pulled up my air compressor from the basement, which not easy, but not exactly a Herculean feat. I aired it up. Seems to be a slow leak. I'll check it in the morning. If it's fine, I'll let her go her 5 miles to work and tell her to stop at a gas station and air it up if she needs it. Then we'll fix it tomorrow,
You can get that. What's that stuff the spray in the tire and it? Does that work?
It works, but you can never check your air again because it'll ruin your air gauge.
Your valve and yeah. They're supposed to be really expensive these days too.
Yeah. I have mechanic friends who say never use this. It's an emergency thing only,
Okay.
But it appears to be a very slow leak. In fact, we were driving it yesterday, and the little low tire pressure light came on. But the temperatures dropped 30 degrees here, so it tends to do that as the the air cools down. It's not the same, so we didn't really pay any attention to it. We didn't drive it today. Took my truck everywhere we needed to go, and then tonight it's flat. So I'm thinking it probably was low yesterday. It probably really was, and we just didn't notice it. So she's got a nail in it or something. No big deal. It happens.
Yeah, it does.
And it'll be a $6 fix while they put a patch on it. Not a big deal.
Yep.
I don't know. That probably costs more than $6 now. That shows how out of touch I am. I haven't had that done in a while.
Hey, just a prep thing for that warm up. I put a link to that show on Netflix I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
It's a trailer. It's only 60 seconds. If you want to watch that before we do the show, because it's self-explanatory, but it's hard to explain without watching it. But if you can relate to it in any way, it might be an interesting discussion. It was a brilliant show, by the way.
Well, my concern is if we can't, it's not going to be good programming if all we can say is you have to go watch this.
Yeah, well, there's that, but it's just if I talk about it, I'm not going to give it justice, and then there's probably something in the trailer that you'll see, and you'll have a different angle on it. I think. I don't know. I know this guy's work, so it's pretty incredible.
Oh, I have actually seen this, or the trailer before. I haven't seen the show, but I've seen the trailer.
Oh, right. Well, the show is incredible.
Yeah, sure, we can talk about that. That sounds interesting.
Cool. There it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, because we all think we wouldn't be duped, but
and we like music. We like magicians, right?
Right.
So this guy's like one of the epic hypnotist magicians. So it's a pretty incredible blend.
All right. Let's see. Go ahead and begin your local recording.
We're off.
And I'm gonna start mine now. And Jenda's in the chat room. Hi, Jenda. How you doing?
Hey, there he is.
And 7:28, and we're ready to go. Seth just slows us down. Clearly, that's the moral of the story. All righty. Yeah, I got nothing else to say, so I'm gonna click start, and we're gonna do this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I should timers. I forget those. Let me launch some timers. Because the last time, was it last week, 2 weeks ago, we didn't have a timer and we went an hour and 50 minutes or something long. Like that. Yeah.
That's all right by me. This is the last one for the year, so if they get an extra few minutes, I mean, hey, maybe it'll tie them over.
Yeah, I mean, we could make it 4 hours long, and then it'll be like, there's every episode you would have gotten in December.
Right.
So I don't know if you're like me, but occasionally I look at the list of like top 50 podcasts or whatever, and I go check them out. And invariably, I don't like them. This American Life or the Serial podcast, actually I haven't checked that one out, but you hear these great reviews about, this is the best podcast ever, and I go listen to it, and I don't like it. Is it just me? Am I just,
No, they're overproduced. They may as well be, what's the satellite radio? Sirius. They may as well be Sirius XM shows. They're not. The thing I like about podcasts is when it's organic and it's just people being people and, just showing the humanity and not having to be all radio friendly and overproduced. And all that high-end stuff is. There's a couple of exceptions. I watch Joe Rogan periodically, but that's about it.
Yeah, and I don't like Joe Rogan just in general. The things he talks about, the way he talks about them don't interest me.
Right.
But I mean, I get why people like him. I don't get why people like some of the most popular ones. And I admit I'm not your regular guy, but maybe those are the sort of things that have to happen before podcasting can catch on. Maybe the kind of chatty guys around the water cooler talk is holding podcasting as a medium back.
Maybe, but I don't know. This is it. It's kind of like YouTube, right? They overproduce YouTube megastars that get all the, hits and all the visibility. Spend 2 days editing their 10-minute video to do that, and they take all the natural content out. They just don't become humans anymore. They become celebrities, and it's just, I don't know. I'm much more of a DIY kind of person. I like that organic stuff. That's just me. I just like people being people. I like raw.
Right. But YouTube didn't become the powerhouse that it is with the raw content. It wasn't until the produced stuff came on the scene that it became a real player.
Yeah. Well, maybe as long as it's not a barrier to entry that's so hard for people to jump through, it's probably fine.
I really hate it when I'm watching a YouTube video or listening to a podcast, or Food Network is really bad about it, where it's so obvious that the entire sentence was put together of clips of other sentences,
Right. Where you can see those edit points.
Right.
They're just so obvious.
Yeah, or the pitch and the intonations change, where you get a rising pitch where just below it was a descending pitch, and humans just don't do that. So it was clearly an edit, and you'll have 15 of those within a paragraph, and it's like, you couldn't read this paragraph, or what it makes me think, like particularly on these so-called reality shows, when I see that, is like, what really happened? Clearly, this is what you want me to think happened because you've pieced this together in this way. But what really happened? Clearly, it wasn't this.
Yeah.
Anyway, random rant there.
Yeah.
I was watching it was a woodworking thing. Guy was talking about table saw technique, and he's one of the guys I like to watch because I like his technique. But it's so overcorrected that you'll get that, like the one sentence will be obviously 3 different takes with subtle lighting differences, and his position changes because he probably said and ah, and he cut those out, and I just don't like it. It ruins the realism of it, I guess.
Yeah,
to your point,
the talent has to learn how to not say and ah.
Right.
That's
Well, and he's not the talent. He's a woodworker. He's not a camera guy. So you expect him to be bad at videos and good at woodworking. Anyway.
Right.
And here we are. We're not good at anything. We just leave all the mistakes in there.
Yeah.
All right. I said I was going to start the show exactly 5 minutes and 30 seconds ago. Here we go. Really doing it this time.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geek Rant, episode 344. First things first, recorded November 25th, 2018, and brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Drive Time Radio for Geeks. I am your host, Mark, the Sultan of the Soapbox Cockerel, and joining me this week, in absence of our good friend Seth the Gooey Kid Anderson, is Miles the Oxygeneer Wakeham. Hello, Miles.
Well, I'm not used to being the first person to talk after you do the intro, so I'm completely lost. All I can say is, Seth, I hope you're feeling better.
Yeah. And Jen in the chat room pipes up, saying hello, everyone, so he gets in there too. Seth is ill. He sent me a text and basically said, I haven't been feeling well all weekend, and I don't think you want my croaky voice on the show. And so I get that. So it doesn't sound like he's at death's door or anything, but was just not in podcasting form. So rest up, buddy. We'll see you next year. That's right, next year. This is our last podcast of 2018.
Oh, yeah. Is this the flu season starting?
I think officially the flu season starts early October, but yeah, we're definitely in the ballpark.
Okay, got that to look forward to.
So this was Thanksgiving week in the U.S., as we talked about last week. So, Miles, did you consume large quantities of fowl of your choice?
Yes, we did. Yeah, pork and fowl. I'm the worst example of. I'm a great example for the keto people, but that's about it. We have my mother-in-law is in from Australia for 3 months, staying with us, and I get on great with my mother-in-law, which is fantastic. So we had a sort of an extended family Thanksgiving thing, which was fun. What did you get up to?
Well, for the first time in I think about 20 years, honestly, we had nobody at our table other than just our family, or my immediate family, my wife and 3 daughters. No extended family. We like to pick up strays. Nobody this year. No elderly person that didn't have anywhere to go, or no college student. And it was just us. And it was nice. I mean, I happen to like my family, but it was kind of a landmark in that way that it was just my immediate family. And we always make a ton of food. My wife bought a 20-pound turkey to feed to the 5 people in my family, so we'll be eating turkey for a while.
Oh man, that's just like fun though. I mean, next time I'm in town, man, I'm dropping by.
The door is always, well, not literally. The invitation is always open. The door will have to be unlocked for you. But there were several times in my early childhood where I was the stray that was taken in, and so it's not like a solemn vow I made to myself or anything, but I do make it a point to try to pick up the strays whenever possible, and usually I get somebody to take me up on it, but not this year.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go and do, maybe in the morning, go to a food kitchen or something. But then I always look at this and think, if I'm so committed to doing that, I should do that every Sunday, or I should do that, a few times a year, not just once a year, just because it's fashionable. But I don't know. I need to do something. One must give back.
Another thing I did this week, I took Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday off, so I had an extended weekend, so to speak, and we got to take in some media. I took my kids to see Wreck-It Ralph. Ralph Breaks the Internet, the sequel to Wreck-It Ralph. It was a fine movie. Like most sequels, not as original or creative as the first, but definitely worth watching. The kids enjoyed it, and the mom and I had some good guffaws throughout there as well. So I recommend Wreck-It Ralph. Ralph Breaks the Internet. The second thing is I finished up Daredevil Season 3. And holy crap, they have come back in all their good form. I mean, I've routinely said Daredevil Season 1 is some of the best film, not just television, best film I've ever seen. Second season was pretty weak, but I stuck with it. Third season knocked it out of the park again. I highly recommend Daredevil's on Netflix, Seasons 1 and 3. 2 is okay.
Oh, okay. My daughter went and saw Wreck-It Ralph last night. She comes home and goes, "Dad, you'd love to see that. You'd love this movie." Apparently, it's got lots of little bits of tech geekery built in, little I don't know, NVIDIA Shield reference, she said.
Yeah, there was just some basic tech inside nods, but also my favorite part of that is Pixar, owned by Disney, making fun of Disney. Was actually my favorite part of the whole movie. It was an extended sequence there with all the Disney princesses. And, you know, Princess Vanellope is a Disney princess, but not like all the others. So that was a very fun little thing that the kids don't really get, but the parents get it. Ah,
okay. Well, I might go and check it out, actually. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to spend a couple of hours. You know, and if like me, you're taking 5 people and you happen to go to a restaurant where they also serve, or a theater where they also serve overpriced food in the theater, it's, you know, take out a bank loan before you go. But, you know, not a bad way to spend the day.
Yeah, you get the comfy chairs.
Yeah, reclining and everything. And the reserve seating. That's the reason I do those things, because I'm just at a point in my life where I don't have time to stand in line. You know, if I have to stand in line, it's not worth it. So reserve my seats a day ahead of time, buy the, you know, I think it was $15 frozen pizza, you know, not ideal, but I got to spend time with my kids, and that's what it was all about.
Yeah, that's true.
And then you want to talk about something that you've seen the show. I've seen the trailer to the show, and it sounds pretty fascinating. Tell us about Darren Brown's Sacrifice. Yeah,
well, Darren Brown is I always thought of him as a magician. He's always a stage magician, one of these kind of, you know, Penn and Teller type. I thought they were just doing magic tricks and so on. But no, actually, he's a psychologist / hypnotherapist, and he does like mass hypnotism. So, you know, these guys have been around for years. There's been hypnotists doing that sort of thing for ages. This guy's a British guy, and he does the most amazing social and human experiments. He's been doing them for ages, and he's made quite a career out of it. He's quite an entertainer. Well, I always thought he was only a UK person, and then lo and behold, he pops up on Netflix with a new show called Sacrifice. And the premise of the show is that when he was in London, there was this group of people that were doing an experiment on how far you could influence someone's behavior by using social media or social techniques to make them do things they wouldn't normally do. That's the premise of it. And it's quite timely. I mean, after you see all of the stuff, you know, on the media with elections and so on, it kind of becomes a timely topic. So I was watching this thing. Well, what happened was this guy from Florida who happened to be in London on vacation, and his girlfriend and him decided to go to participate in one of these shows, and they picked this guy out of the crowd. And the one reason they picked him was that he's a staunch anti-immigration guy. And, you know, ever since he was a kid, his whole parents and everything were talking about, you know, illegal immigrants shouldn't be in America and they're stealing your job and all that stuff. And so Darren Brown attempted to try to change his belief system, not using hypnotherapy, well, a bit of hypnotherapy in there, but using techniques of suggestive techniques and so on. And this show goes from him being this staunch kind of right-winged anti-immigrant guy, and all the way through to him and I'm not going to tell you whether he does or he doesn't, but the premise is they're going to set it up so that he is going to be put in a position where he has to take a bullet for an illegal alien who's about to get shot. And they take you through the entire journey where you see how social experiments and suggestive technologies and all these manipulation tactics work and change behavior from somebody who started off with one belief system and ended up with an entirely different one. It's an amazing show. And if you're into mind hacking, I guess, this would be one of the best shows that demonstrate how it all works.
Sounds fascinating. I will add that to my list of things to watch, and maybe we'll talk about it on a different show.
That'd be a good one.
So the topic of this show, the first things first, this is, as I mentioned, the last show of the year. We're taking December off, as we have done the last couple of years. I find it a nice, refreshing thing. And plus, now that I've got kids that are teenagers, there's always some sort of choir performance or band concert or party or something pretty much every weekend in December. So rather than try to work around that, we'll just take December off, and we'll be back, I think, second Wednesday in January is how that'll work out. That'll be the first Wednesday after the first Sunday in January. But anyway, we'll talk about that at a later date. But as I got to thinking about the end of the year and that sort of thing, resolutions come to mind. We talk about making resolutions, and some stuff that I've been dealing with my kids, just as they're 16, 14, and 10. So we have these kind of life lesson sort of conversations on a regular basis. And then, I work with some much younger people than I do. And so the sort of trend that popped up, and I thought it would be interesting to get Miles, and sadly Seth won't be able to chime in on it. Their concepts on it is setting priorities. So that's why I call it first things first. I've known a lot of people my age, 40-somethings, who come to, they're staring down the barrel of 50 and realize that they've just been bumbling through half a century and they don't have a plan, and life has happened to them all along the way. So I thought we would talk a little bit about, setting your priorities. If you don't set your priorities, life will set them for you, or your boss will set them for you, or, some other thing will tell you what to do. And it's always best if you can tell your life what to do instead of your life telling you what to do. So that's my intro. Miles, what are your thoughts on it, just off the top of your head?
I think it's a topic that we need to have this conversation. I think we all do. I'm going to give you my input from a totally alien angle, which is probably atypical of most, but it directly parallels your point. I mean, yeah, you've got to have a plan.
Right. Because if you don't, somebody else does.
Yeah.
And I know when I was much younger and getting started out in my career, and then, a few years ago, I switched careers. So I became the new guy at 40 years old, starting over again. And, I'm starting with work because that tends, particularly with men, but with women also, it tends to be the driving influence. You get a group of men together who don't know each other. Within the first few minutes, the conversation will turn to, what do you do? You get a group of people, men together who do know each other, and the conversations will be about, the problems or the turmoils or the whatever's going on at work. That's what men talk about. Men talk about work.
It's common ground.
Right.
That's what it is.
Because we are known by what we do. So it's easy to get caught up in that work and to let work ruin your life. Work becomes your life. And I'm lucky to work with good people and a good company that understands the concept of balance. And one of the regular things that we talk about a lot around our office is work-life balance, because my employer knows that if they work you to the point of being unhealthy, they not only, have ruined you as a member of society, but they've ruined a worker. They need you to have balance to be a good worker. And so let's, just talk about I put in the notes, Cats in the Cradle, that song by, can't remember, Cat Stevens, no. I don't remember who is it. Anyway, the internet will tell me, where, basically the guy works his whole life and can't spend any time with his son. And then when the son grows up and doesn't want to spend any time with the dad, I'm staring down the barrel of that with a 16-year-old and looking at, the kind of things, choices I made or didn't make. And that's the biggest thing. The things I didn't make, the choices I didn't make, that's still a choice. And so, you got to balance your work and your life. Miles is going to tell us who that is right now.
Harry Chapin.
Harry Chapin. And if you're, if you grew up in the 90s, you know it better as a song by Ugly Kid Joe. You didn't write that.
Yeah.
And so you got to have a plan to balance your life. What is that plan? And I don't have any magic bullets, but I do know one thing. Any job that doesn't include the phrase, would you like fries with that, includes something called paid time off. Take it. Don't stack it up. Don't stock it up. Don't buy it out. Take your paid time off. Companies give you that for a reason.
Well, let's define a job and a career and all that stuff and break it down to the simplest lowest common denominator, and it starts to make sense when you build it back up again. Because so much of our social culture is making assumptions about things that we actually didn't really break down and analyze. A job is to sell your time to another party for an amount of money. It's that simple. Your product that you're selling is your time, and they pay you money for that time based on some sort of negotiated price, whether that's a price based on peer value or what they define it as and what you're willing to take. It is the value of your time. And the thing that we have to understand is that as human beings, we live on this planet for 2,000 working hours per year that you are giving to somebody else. It's that simple. So if you multiply that by the number of years you've got, that gives you the total number of hours that you're going to multiply by your hourly rate, and that gives you a total life income, and that determines what you're allowed to do and be, and in effect, the caste system of the United States is based on economics.
And some people may be listening to this thinking, well, I make products. I don't sell my time. I build furniture or I write songs. It's still the same thing. You put time and effort and know-how into the widget that you're selling, and then you put a price on that based on how long it took you and how difficult it was. Same equation.
Exactly. So if you go to college and you say, you know what, I'm going to become an accountant. So I'm going to go through and do 4 years of degree, and I'm going to pay, or maybe you do postgrad or whatever. I'm going to pay a certain amount of money to get that education that's going to give me a value per hour that I'm going to sell. And your sell price as a private accountant might be $150 an hour or something like that. You multiply that by the number of hours you are willing to work, and that becomes your income level. So when you say my career is to be an accountant, well, there's a big difference between a staff accountant working at a corporation or a small business or a medium business, or a bookkeeper or a tax accountant or a corporate counsel, or a financial planner or whatever. They all differ within that scope, but you're still, no matter what you say, you might be proud to say, look, I make, $300,000 a year because I'm a super duper cool Wall Street financial dude. Yeah, but you sell your time. And at the end of the day, when you're lying on your deathbed, you're the same guy as me and Mark and everybody else. You're a human being with a biological lifespan, and you sold your time. That's it. And if you start from that premise, it changes the outlook tremendously.
Yeah, and you need a plan for that. And one of the things that is it Mr. Money Mustache? One of those guys, one of the guys that you like, Miles, that you recommended. I was listening to the podcast, and they talk about the other things that you have to do. So there's the hours you spend at work. Let's say it's a 9-to-5 job, right? Well, you've got to drive to and from that job. There's hours involved in that. And, of course, you make that choice based on where you want to live, the school you want to put your kids in, that sort of thing. And then there's the continuing education. Every job that doesn't involve asking, would you like fries with that, requires that you learn more and you adapt. And so there's some time that you spend to that. A lot of people just put in that, 2,000 hours a year, and really they're spending, 7,000 hours a year. And they're just not thinking in terms of what the job is really costing them. Right.
That's so true. But you're right. Continuing education, if you're in a trade like you're a nurse or you're a lawyer or a doctor, you're expected to meet a certain regulated threshold to be able to maintain the license to practice in that field. For everybody else, if you're an IT guy, continuing education is kind of a built-in. We reinvent ourselves every 6 months. It's just the nature of the beast, and we're constantly out there reading blogs and magazines and watching YouTube videos and learning and finding recommendations from friends and peers, and it never stops.
And you have to make sure that because if you don't do that, you get left behind. And the same thing if you're maybe you're a pure artist, you're a painter or a sculptor, and people who create art for the sake of art. I got no issue with that, but you got to be able to sell it if you want to eat. And if you're making art for the sake of art and nobody wants to buy it, you're what's known as a starving artist. And so how do you not be a starving artist? You pay attention to what people want to buy, and you find your art, you find your avenue for art that people will buy, your avenue for music. But that's still, it's a matter of paying attention and learning and listening and growing as a person. Even the greatest, artist, Picasso, if you look at his early work and his late work, vastly different because he grew as an artist.
Well, also the thing they forget to mention is that artists have to become experts in supply chain, because at some point you originate something, you got to get it to a marketplace, and you got to get paid for it, and therefore you've become very, very vested in the art of distribution.
All right, so Miles, earlier you were saying that you were going to come at this from an alien perspective. So what is your alien perspective on, the maintaining a balance in the life that you get paid to live and the life that you don't get paid to live?
All right. Well, let me start with a little context. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but it drives a lot of the things that affect me personally, because it was a very personal experience. My father worked for a very large corporation in Australia. I won't mention them because I'll probably get some legal liability for this, but they're still around, and they're a very large construction materials manufacturer. And he was working predominantly as a roof inspector. His job was to go out on site and inspect large commercial roof installations that these guys were doing. And this is back in the 50s, sometime around then, when he was sort of peaking in his career. Well, what they didn't say back then was that there was a building material that was commonly being used, and this particular company was like the leader in this field, called asbestos. Today, we cringe when we hear that word, because we know how carcinogenic that material was, and all of the code requirements that buildings have got to get stripped down and had it removed, because science taught us that this was bad. Well, my father devoted 45 years of his life, basically all of his working life, to one corporation, the corporation that was going to take care of him and was going to look after him and give him the retirement, and he sacrificed himself for a paycheck to raise a family, put me through school and the whole bit, standard thing. He retired at 65, like most people do, and he died at the age of 67 from asbestosis, which I guess over here they call mesothelioma. Mm-hmm. It's a cancer of the lung, which is caused from the scarring from years and years of exposure to this material. At the time when he passed, we didn't know that this was a thing. We didn't know that this was a liability the corporation had. The last thing in the world you really care about is that, your father's died. But that was a hard lesson for me in my early 20s to see, because I was the guy who had to, identify the body and do, all that stuff, which is really hard. And I'm an only child, so it's all on me. So anyway, having done that, I looked back at the whole thing and I thought, after, you go through this, you kind of debrief yourself, right? You think, what am I going to learn from this? I mean, as horrible as this experience is, what can I learn from this experience? And the one thing I learned was, don't trust one company to be there to look after you, because if you don't take care of your own responsibilities, your own life and your own self, and you don't give all to the company, maybe, look, he probably wouldn't have known what he was getting into back then, but maybe he would have. I don't know. at the end of the day, to work and give your life to a company and then get 2 years of retirement and then die is not a good career path. Not for me, it wasn't. I looked at this whole thing and I said, there but for the grace of God go I. Not me. No, I ain't going to do that. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make a name for myself, and I'm not going to rely on a company to provide for me to do that because I can't trust them. And to this day, I still carry that kind of mantra around. What I realized when I didn't know, it took me decades to work this out, but what I started realizing was that we define what we think we are based on the job you have, and therefore I guess you call it lifestyle inflation that comes with that job. So if you earn $50,000, you'll live a $50,000 lifestyle. That's just how it is. And you'll look at things from that person's perspective, and people will look at you as that person, and you will carry around that mantra, whether it be the car you drive, the clothes you wear, whether you go to Starbucks or you don't, the phone you carry. It's all part of a social contract we have with each other that says, I'm that guy, I earn that money. The problem is that in order for you to break free of that, you have to sacrifice not only you're sacrificing your time to earn that money, but you start sacrificing future time. You take loans out, you get a credit card, you get a mortgage, you get a student loan, you get a car loan, whatever it is, what you're doing is you're sacrificing your future time in order to have that thing, to be that person, to look that way, to maybe look like the $75,000 a year guy, not the 50 or the 100 or the whatever. It's a choice. And the way I look at it is that it shouldn't matter, because what you do with your time is sacred. And if you don't treat it as sacred, you don't deserve to have it. I mean, we're on this planet for, I don't want to get preachy, but we're on this planet for a very finite amount of time. And if we don't make the most of that time, we're not committing ourselves to our end goal. So I look at a job and a career as an impediment to having the freedom to be unconstrained to do whatever you need to do. And I've spent most of my life trying to work out the math and the formula and the methodology that enables me to not be my father. And that's kind of the angle I come at it from.
And so that, what you're talking about is retirement. That's the word that we apply to that. But it's not really retirement. It's the word that is more commonly used these days is financial independence, the point at which you don't rely on an outside entity to finance your life.
Yes. I don't know if I tell you what here's what I call it. I call it sustainability. What I do is I look at everything in reverse. What I look at is, for myself and my family, my daughter, our house, our dogs, whatever it is, it costs a certain amount of money to keep that, to have that. And you make the decision that is what you want, right? You want the big house and the cars and whatever. Well, that's fine. You make the decision that's what you want. But work in reverse. Like if you decide I want that house and I want those cars, what is that going to cost you per month, per year, whatever it might be? And what do you need to make in order to fund that? And then you build all these contingencies in, what if an adverse event happens? What if your car breaks down? What if you go into hospital? All that stuff. But you work out a number. And what you've got to do is take that number and you've got to carve it down to as small a possible number as you can possibly get it. And you need to know what that is. And, the boring word for that is a budget. But really, the reality is it's a life expense cost. And what I do is I start with that. And then I work out how am I going to make that amount of money by doing the least amount of work that involves the least amount of time possible. It's the lazy way of trying to get through life. And funny thing is, I was a contractor once in a corporation, a programmer. And one of the guys I was working with said something so wise, and I'll never forget it. He goes, you know what? When I hire programmers, I try and find the laziest people I can find. I said, why? And he goes, because they're the smartest ones and they'll get the job done 10 times faster than anybody else because they're lazy. And I started realizing, that's a talent, isn't it?
My uncle used to say the same thing. He said, if I had a choice between a hardworking guy and a lazy guy, I'll take the lazy guy every time because we'll be done sooner.
Yeah.
Get the job done sooner.
Right on. Right on. And if that means so that's the whole thing. You've got to know what the amount of money you have to make is. And then all your stress goes away because at that point, you know what you have to do, right? And then the world is your oyster about how you make that money. It doesn't matter what you do. You can go down to your Goodwill, buy some stuff and sell it on eBay and make a profit. Maybe that's enough to make your money. Maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe it's I want to invest in Vanguard index funds and make my money that way. Sure. If you want to do that, that's what you want to do. Maybe you want to buy real estate, whatever. Do whatever you want to do. Maybe you want to have a job and you want to work 40 hours for an employer and do what you love doing because it's not work, it's what your passion is, then do that. Whatever it is, it's your choice. And all you got to know is what is the number I have to make? And then it's up to me how I get there.
And too many people come at that from instead of the angle of what do I need, what do I want, or what is my numbers. It's what will they give me, whoever they is, right? That the people who talk about a living wage and we need a livable minimum wage, they have that mindset of whatever they will give me. I have to have X hours of work this week because I have a car payment, right? So I have a car payment, so I have to work. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it would be better if you planned your work around what you wanted before you went out and bought the car, right? And if you had made a plan instead of just taking whatever job you could get, and I say all the time, every good thing in my life, including my wife and my children, I've stumbled off balance and backwards into. I don't plan like I should, but I've been really blessed anyway. But looking back later now as a man of middle age, because I'm going to be 90, so 45 is middle age, is you want to. I wish I had planned better. I wish I had done what you did, and what a lot of people, they work so they can get a raise, so that they can spend that raise, so that they can look forward to the next raise, so that they can work and they can get a raise. And there's nothing wrong with that either. You have a career path. Miles, you laid out the ideal thing there. Find the thing that you would do for free and then find somebody to pay you to do that thing, and you'll never work a day in your life. I personally don't have that job. I have a job that I'm good at, and I like who I do it with, but the job is not the thing that I would choose to do. If I won, a multi-million-dollar lottery today, I wouldn't continue to do that job because I love it so much. But it is a good job, and it pays for my family's status. It pays for everything we need. But I have a plan there too. I don't want to stay here. I want to move within the corporation or outside of the corporation, whatever it takes. I have a plan for where I want to be in the next 10 years. Those plans have never, I've always had a 10-year plan. I've never met it. I've always either outperformed or underperformed, but at least I have a plan, and I make it. And so at my company, there are certain moves that I'm going to make, certain behaviors I'm going to engage in, certain things that I'm going to do because I have a plan, right? I'm going to work harder than the people around me. I'm going to dress better than the people around me. I'm going to be the guy that is so important to the company that when there come time to do layoffs, they wouldn't even consider laying me off. All right, that's a plan for me. And I get up every morning and I go to work and I execute that plan of excellence. Not because I love the job, not because I'm passionate about it, because it meets the needs of my family. And I have a plan for where I want to be, in 10 years. And it's really an income plan. It's not, I don't have my eye on that job. I have an eye on that income. And sort of what you were talking about. I need this income. I need to I have a spreadsheet. Those who know me won't be surprised that I have a spreadsheet. My retirement planning is a spreadsheet, and I know more or less where I want to be when I become financially independent. What that number is, I know more or less what I have to do, and so I look around me and say, what are the steps that are going to get me to there? If you work in a corporate office, if you show up when you're supposed to show up, leave when you're supposed to leave, and work the whole time you're there, you will stand out among all those around you. Just by doing your job. If you then are excellent at your job, you stand out even more. And these are not miracle tips here. This is just be intentional about the job that you've chosen, even if it's not your passion. I'm so tired of listening to younger people. You know, it's easy to blame millennials, but it tends to be younger people who have this mindset of, oh, I hate this job. I'm just going to do what it takes to get by. No, you have to excel at that job. You know, I used to say that, you know, of Gen Xers, of people like me, the fact that I got the job is reason enough to work. Millennials, that's the starting point. All right, I have the job, now give me a reason to work. And you, that's painting with a broad brush, but it has seemed to be true in the people I've known. But you have to make a plan. You have to work that plan. You have to execute that plan, because if you don't, you'll just be bumbling along, and 10 years from now, you'll be in the same job you have. Why? Because you're unpromotable. Because you haven't done what needed to be done. Because you didn't know you needed to do it, or maybe you did and you didn't care. So if you find yourself, if you're looking back 10 years and you're looking forward 10 years, and in that 20-year span you don't see a difference in your life, that's because you failed to plan. And it's not too late. Start a plan now. It just means you got to work harder.
Well, let me give you a couple of angles on that often we forget. I in the very early part of the conversation, I mentioned that we sell our time by the hour to our employer. And so what you're trying to do is say, look, I value my commitment to what I'm doing. I want to demonstrate that value to the employer by letting them get the most leverage out of the hours that they buy from me. Just like a vendor would try and create a great product and sell it to the right people, right?
I'm trying to be the highest quality product possible.
There you go. Right. And that's perfect. But I wouldn't say it's an argument. I would say it's an angle to this, that the premise of your product being your time means you have a finite resource that only you can provide based on how many hours you're capable of working. And yet you have a single customer for that time, which is this one employer, who will buy as much of that from you as possible up to a point where that's either regulated or their budget stops, where they say, you know, I'm paying you 40 hours of work a week, but if you want to give me 50, that's fine, but I ain't paying you a dime more. If that's what you want to do because you think that quantity is a representation of quality and of value to them, then so be it. You know, you make that decision. But at the end of the day, you're selling time. Like a vendor sells a product on a shelf, you're selling time. My argument is that you have a finite amount of you. And that is a false narrative to begin with, because at the end of the day, if you get sick or you can't work for one reason or another and you can't give them your time anymore, then all of a sudden your income stops or it's disrupted or something like that. That when you get to 65, like my father, and you say, I'm too old, I don't want to work anymore, then your income stops. Well, what do we do in retirement? We look for the savings that we put in, the investments, and we try and live off that yield if we were smart enough to do that. If we're not, we look to the government to support us by way of a pension or a social security payment or something like that, if that even exists when we get to retire. We're punting on a future we're so habitual into going to work every day and spending X amount of hours at work and forgetting that we're selling our time, that when we get to the point where we either don't have the time to sell or we don't want to sell it anymore, we forgot what happens when you don't have time to sell, but you still need to get money.
Which is why your plan also has to include a stopping time and a contingency. Something as simple as disability insurance. If I get hit in the head and lose my ability to think, I am no longer able to do any of the things that I do. I need to have a plan for that. In the modern world, that plan is called insurance. You have a plan. You put it in place.
Yeah, and know that life has got risks. We don't go through a life without some adversity. It all happens to everybody, and whether you're rear-ended in a car accident or whether you have a God forbid, a life-threatening illness, or a member of your family does, or something that requires you to divert time to address those events, then all of a sudden your employer is going to look at you and go, hey, where's that time I'm buying? Mm-hmm. And you're going to go, sorry, buddy, I can't sell you any right now. I'm busy over here. And they're going to go, well, I'll go into the next guy, right? They don't care. because the supply and demand curve is heavily weighted in their favor. There's one customer and many vendors. So in this case, the vendors are the employees and the customer is the employer. So this is where the fallacy of time as a basis of income breaks down. And this is the secret sauce. This is what I learned. And it takes time. In the 90s, in the very, very early 90s, I was blessed to find the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And when I read that book, and my wife did as well, which was an amazing thing. We both read it at the same time. We changed our life. We realized that if we want to go through life being employees all the time, Kiyosaki talks in terms of a thing called a 4-quadrant system where you're either an employee or you're self-employed or you're what's the other one? I think a small business owner, and the final one is you're an investor. And these are the 4 quadrants. And the employee is very limited in what you can do. You can't get the tax deductions everybody else can get. You have to work the hours. It's a tough one. The self-employed person, it's like you've created your own job, but it's a little better. The business owner, at least they can have other people generating income for them. And then finally, the investor, where the income is being generated from assets that you own. And that was the turning point for me. And what I've done for 20-something years is I've taken the money. So the formula for me is know your budget to live and try and find a way to live as frugally as possible. Generate twice that amount of income for a 5-year period and save 50% of what you make. And it's really hard, but if you're a college student, it's not, because you just got out of college. You're used to ramen and you're used to living with 4 other people in a room. Go and do that in the real world and make $75,000 salary and keep the money and bank it and invest it. That's why I like what the FI movement is doing. That's their mantra. But then where I think it breaks down is that you've got to start buying assets that generate money. In my case, we bought a lot of real estate and we rent them out. I've also bought vending machines. I've bought other businesses. I've invested in mutual funds. I've got so many different diversified assets that have been accumulated over the years that make me money. And what happens is I live predominantly off the dividend. I get a monthly bonus from the investments I made 20 years ago, or I get rent money from properties we bought and paid off years ago. And at the end of the day, that money comes in. I don't have to get out of bed. I mean, if I get hit by a truck tomorrow, I don't care. I've still got money coming in. And if I want to retire, well, that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm not retired. I don't like that word. I hate that word. It seems to me like an end point, a death knell. But because I don't sell hours to make money, I have assets that do that. I have the freedom to jump on a plane and fly and see some friends in Portugal, or hey, I want to climb a mountain climb a volcano in Mexico. Yeah, I'll go do that. Or I want to go see family back in Australia. I have the freedom to do that because I'm not having to sell my time by the hour. The problem is it takes 20 years to get to that place, and it takes struggle. And it takes hard and diligent work, and it takes discipline and frugality and savings to be able to acquire the money, to acquire the assets. It's the goose that keeps on giving. It's you've got to see it that way. And if you're lucky enough to be listening to this podcast and you're under the age of 30, the world is your oyster. If you just took my advice and you live frugally and save half your money and buy assets, and one day you too shall be free of not having to work for the man anymore. And that's it.
If you weren't fortunate enough to start at 25 or 30 or 20, then you're like me. I'm 46, and I'm way behind, quote unquote, on that objective. But hopefully, I've got about 20 years left in me of selling my time at an increasingly valuable rate of my time. That's my goal, anyway. And I am aggressively saving and investing, and so it's going to be harder for me. Miles, it's a point that's been made before. If you could get out of med school and be a doctor and live like a med school student for just 5 years, you're done. right? Whatever else you do after that is gravy. So if you're young, great. If you're not, if you didn't do that, if you're like me, you had kids and you scraped along and you just, you're not behind, but you're not doing great either, then that's fine too. You gotta start your plan now. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today.
Very well said.
So if you want to sit under a shade tree, plant it.
But you've got one advantage which the 20-something-year-old doesn't have: wisdom and experience. You see, over the course of decades how to best serve your customer, right? Your diligent approach to what you do for your employer is something that you learnt the hard way.
Exactly.
A 25-year-old person, a millennial, as you rightly compare, has not gone through that life's lesson. They haven't been around the block yet. They don't know what life is like without a job. They don't know what the value of that is yet. Until you've gone through those experiences, you don't have as much to offer. So therefore, your hourly selling price should be higher than theirs because you have more to offer. And the key is to take that experience and to compress what for me was a 20-year experience down to maybe a 5. And it can be done. It can be done. We live in a world of YouTube video tutorials and I could you know what I love doing is watching some of these like extreme couponing people. They go on YouTube and they tell me how to fill my pantry for nothing. And I'm like, you really? Is this how you do it? So, okay, I'm up for that. So I'll get my smartphone out and I'll download the apps they've got and I'll find out what to buy and I'll go out there and do it because I love it. I love the idea of their wisdom hacking the system and all of a sudden my pantry's full and it didn't cost me a dime. And guess what I can do with that $200 that I just saved? I could buy a vending machine and it could give me coins every single month, or I could put it into a real estate down payment, or I could fund some index funds on Vanguard, or I could put it in a Charles Schwab account or whatever. But I got my pantry filled. And who's the smart guy here? That's the excitement. That's where it is. And you know what? If it took me 5 hours to run around town and go to every Walmart and CVS and Kroger's and whatever else to go and do that, it's the fun of it. I do this stuff without, and guess what? No one pays me by the hour to do it. I don't care. I'm learning. That's the thing. The seasoning of somebody at our age and the experiences we've had means we will gravitate to that. We will do those things, and we're going to brag about it to our buddies at the bar down the road, or we're going to talk about it at the church, or we're going to, because it's infectious. That's the key. Now, that is hard to get when you're 25.
That's true. Although I don't share your passion for that. Black Friday, for example, getting up at 5 to save $100 on a TV. I will pay you $100 to bring me that TV without me having to do that.
I saved $500 on a TV on Black Friday because it didn't
you didn't
buy
buy
one.
It. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've had that conversation with my wife. I tell her all the time she's the salesman's perfect mark. She believes every pitch anybody ever gives her, and I love her dearly. That's one of the great qualities because I convinced her to marry me, and she did. But she'll say, this thing was 50% off. I saved $100 by buying it. No, you spent $200 by buying it. You didn't save anything. If you'd not bought it, you would have saved $200. Anyway.
Right on. So you had mentioned about retirement. Like my perspective of retirement is just not having to have a job per se. But what do you think people do when they retire?
Well, I've seen in my life 3 different examples, and that's not a lot, but I would say that it's representative of guys who worked 40 years at the company, retired. Their children and grandchildren bought them the golden lazy boy as the retirement present. They sat down on the lazy boy and they died 3 years later. People need a reason to live. They need a thing to do. And I like what Thou Shalt Prosper, Rabbi Daniel Lappin. I like what he says about retirement. It's not retiring. It's just a different job. You always work. You're always doing something. He talks about in the Jewish culture, there's no such thing as retirement. You just shift your job. to, having people work for you or something like that. I think it's important to not stop being productive, because that's the point at which you start dying. When you stop producing, you start dying. So having a reason to retire for me, it's not sitting on the couch. It's traveling. It's packing my wife up and flying to Europe. All right. So now, like you said, I don't have to have an employer owning my time, but also I have to, I have to get out from under that, but also have to have money saved to be able to do that. And of course, great travel hacking tips from my friend Miles, who tells me how to fly to Paris for almost nothing. But there's a lot of planning involved in that. And so that's one of my things is I want to be able to do what I want, to be productive. If I want to bring in a local rock band and produce their album for free just because I like their music, I want to be able to do that. That would be a fun sort of retirement for me. If I want to sit behind this microphone and podcast to people who don't care all day, every day, I want to be able to do that. So that's my kind of retirement is I don't want to be selling my time anymore. I want to be owner of my time. That's my goal in retirement, to do what I want when I want because I own my time. And I haven't had that position since 17 years old. When I first started working my first hourly wage job, somebody has owned my time ever since. So for 30 years, almost, somebody has owned every minute, every working minute of my time. I want to own that back. That's my goal of retirement.
Well, it's like I said, the anatomy right from the start. We sell our time by the hour to a customer that is our employer, and they'll take as much as we are willing to sell up to a point where you've negotiated a price based on that number. And if you realize that it's a finite resource, that we only have a certain number of thousands of hours on this planet before we expire, we hit our own use-by date, then all of a sudden the value of those hours goes up. If they're not willing to pay what you think your hours are worth based on the finite amount of them, I'm sorry, you can't make more of them, right? You can't scale up your time. It's what you've got. It's what you've been given, and you need to respect it. And it's a question of, I mean, I would say to anybody right now who's stuck in a job that they hate and they're working too many hours and they just can't seem, they're on the treadmill and they can't seem to get off the treadmill. It's not easy. It isn't. But the treadmill is going at the pace that your expense budget is set it to. And if you can dial that back and you can start embracing frugality as being something that's an enjoyable, fun experience, as opposed to oh geez, I'd never do that. And no, you don't need to go to Starbucks for coffee. You can make your own. And no, you don't need the latest F-150. You can buy a junker and learn to fix it. And you don't need to sign up for the latest cable TV plan, because you can cord cut and probably get it yourself. All those things take time, but the one thing you get back when you don't have to be on the treadmill for as many hours is you get your time back. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if you have more time, you can learn to travel hack. You can learn to extreme coupon. You can learn to grow your own food. You can learn to live in 3 different places in the world because it's cheaper or the climate's better or whatever. You can be the person you've always wanted to be, but you've got to get your time back. We sell it out so easily. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to destroy the economics of the United States, which is based on, Fortune 500 corporations and template restaurants on every street corner and a McDonald's and a Walmart in every town. I'm not trying to break that dynamic, but I don't honestly believe that dynamic is serving the citizenry as well as it could be. And that some people will break from that and they'll say, I don't want that anymore. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be my own plumber. I'm going to be my own wood turner. I'm going to be my own artist. I'm going to do what's my passion, because I don't want to wait until I'm 65 before I can do that.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, the budget thing, the planning. My truck is 12 years old. My wife's car is 10 years old, and we don't plan to get anything new within a decade, probably, because there's no need to. They're fine. We live in, probably one of the more modest houses of people of my income range. It's a freaking palace compared to what I grew up in, but it's, it's all relative. It's all about the choices you make. You can spend your money now, or you can spend it later. And I'd rather spend it later by buying back from my employer. We've thrown out some names here: Dave Ramsey, Daniel Lapin, Richard Kiyosaki. There's lots of things out there, resources for helping you know how to do this. Rich Dad Poor Dad is a great book. I take umbrage, I'm just going to say up front, with Kiyosaki is much more comfortable with debt than I ever want to be. And he talks about leveraged investments. That's his big thing is, if the payment and the taxes and the mortgage and all that is $50 less than you make on the product, then you win. And I get that from a point of view, but there are a lot of people in 2008 who had those loans called and, their house of cards came crumbling down. So, I fear debt mainly because I'm older. When I was younger and had less to lose, I probably wouldn't have cared as much. But anyway, I just want to throw out some resources there.
I'm with you on that. I hate debt. I'm not a debt-oriented person. Anybody who knows me will tell you that. The one thing I realize is, and I hate when they say there's good debt and bad debt, but the problem often is that when you're looking to acquire a very expensive asset that you cannot pay cash for, it may delay your ability to get it so far into the future that you may not ever get it.
Right.
And when it came to real estate, I did take some risks in the very early days of saving up a lot of money, buying a property, flipping it, turning that into another property, down payment, buying 2 or 3, flipping that. And that was the way that I doubled down and got through this. And you're right, it's musical chairs, and you just hope music's not gonna stop and you're without a chair. And that has happened to me before. It's a high-risk endeavor sometimes to do this. Thankfully, over time, the smart money is you let the tenant pay your property mortgage off. Right. You don't pocket that money and go and buy the flat screen TV. You keep the frugality angle going. You let the tenant pay down the property, and then they've become the financier to your mortgage, and your mortgage is so minimal at that point that you could just pay it off with the additional money that you're making on the side or something like that. That takes time to get to that, but 10 years is a reasonable time period to actually achieve that with a couple of properties. And look, you get the right types of properties and they're generating a couple of $1,000 of rent a month. You get 5 of those properties, you don't need to work anymore. If that's a 10-year span and you start with 1 and you get that one going and you get it online and you use it to leverage down 2 and you're willing to take some risk, yes, you can accelerate it. If you're not willing to take some risk, then don't go for $10,000 a month. Go for 2. Start with that and maybe cut your hours back a little bit because you've got an extra $2,000 coming in every month. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Right.
And then maybe go out and buy some vending machines. If $5,000-$6,000 a vending machine, do a deal with the local grocery store or a gas station or something and say, I want to put a vending machine that sells, I don't know, drinks or something out the front here. I'll share 50-50 with you on what we make on this thing. They'll come back and go, sure, I don't have to do anything. You take the risk, go ahead. And then all of a sudden, their traffic is generating you money that you're sharing with them. Everyone's happy. You're making money. Your investment's paid off in 6 months. Go and do it again. I mean, it's not work, right? I mean, people think of this, oh, I've got to go and stock the thing and I've got to go get the coins out or whatever. You're really complaining about that? Seriously? But you're going to spend 45 minutes on the road to a job you probably hate each way. And you're going to get there and have to wear a stupid monkey suit and sit in a cubicle and do your thing for 8, 9, 10 hours, and you're complaining about the vending machine? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's me. I know guys who are making major bucks, and what they do is they go out and they hit garage sales and they buy other people's junk, and they know what they're doing because they've worked it out, and they bring it home, they dust it off, and they stick a photo of it on eBay, and they sell it for 10 times what they paid. And I've done that myself. I've bought for a $100 investment of old vintage computer equipment. I turned it into $3,600, and I knocked it out maybe in about 3 months. Now, if that's doable, and I did it on the weekend, it didn't take much time. It was fun. I enjoyed doing it. And all of a sudden, I made some money. What did I do with that money? Well, I invest that money, and then that money generates some dividend, and the hits keep on coming, man. And then all of a sudden, yeah, you're producing that band that you wanted to produce for free.
There you go. I feel like we've reached that point where we're retreading ground. You know, every conversation devolves to that at some point. But one thing I did want to make, when we were talking about risk and debt, I want to tell you that $100,000 Ivy League degree in social work you got is every bit as big a risk as buying a house. I mean, debt is debt, and just because it's federally insured doesn't. Well, you know what that means? That means they will never stop haunting you. That's what that means. I'm just really concerned that the next big crash is not going to be real estate debt, but college debt, because it's unsustainable and it's ridiculous right now. And if anybody, we don't have a lot of young listeners, but if anybody out there can hear me, let me advise you to don't do that. You know, outside of your first job, very rarely does anybody ask where you went to school. Nobody cares.
It's true. Yeah, I think we're carrying a $1.5 trillion debt load on student loan debt. And my biggest, I'm with you on this 100%. My biggest fear is that we're going to bring in a new administration or a new party, and they're going to want to do something which is good for the younger citizenry, for allowing them to discharge it. And they're going to have changed the congressional law that says that student loan debt cannot be discharged into bankruptcy, and they're going to flip that upside down. And the second they do that, the economy is going to collapse, because everybody is going to bankrupt themselves out of that $400,000 debt load they got when they were 20 years old and they were not really in a position where they were capable of signing any contract. But we, the people, are going to be inheriting that. It's coming, and I don't see an alternative, because it ain't getting any better. If this number doesn't start going down, what are you going to do?
All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. Doom and gloom to end the year. Congratulations. No, I think the overall tone of this show was hopeful and helpful. I hope it was anyway. But, you know, if we weren't raising alarm about things, that's the benefit of being older, is you've made more mistakes, you know. And I think it was Mark Twain that said any fool can learn from his own mistakes. The wise man learns from other people's mistakes. These two old guys are telling you that giant crushing debts of any kind are a mistake, and thinking that you always have extra time to sell back to an employer is also a mistake. That's a debt, you know. Anyway, I'm just going to stop right there. These are the things that take planning. You need to. This is not a big thing. Take 10 minutes and sit down and talk to the people in your life, your spouse, your significant other, maybe just your dog, you know, and just ask really hard questions. You know, a new year is coming up. What do we want our life to look like 365 days from now? Start there. It's a simple question. That's a
very, very good approach. If you're trying to do things like budget and you're trying to reduce your expenses, put a carrot out there. Put a goal, a dream, an aspiration that might be, as you said, the trip to Europe, or it might be the new car, or it might be the whatever, and put the challenge on the table that says, you know, we can have that thing, but we can't go into debt for it. How do we get it? And you know what? You might get the money after a while, and by the time you get the money, you might look at that thing and go, I don't want it. You know, it was a great idea back in the day, but whatever. I got this money. What am I going to do with it? Yeah, you go and invest it.
You know, in my early days, I financed steak dinners for 15 years. Put them on that credit card and carried a balance on that card for 15 years. That steak dinner cost me $1,800 when it was all said and done. I'm telling you,
mistake, man.
This is a mistake that people do, right? They'll go out and they'll buy something on credit because they can, and you know that piper always gets paid. So I like the idea. Small goals. Have a conversation with yourself, as Michael Jackson said. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to make a change. Because if you don't make a change, you'll never be anything other than what you are. If you are perfectly content and happy with your life exactly as it is, congratulations, you have arrived. If there was anything in your life you want to change, that's not going to happen unless you plan for it. First things first. Make a plan.
Right on. Yep.
I'm not going to beg for money. I did a lot of that last week. I gave an impassioned plea for pay for what you like. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to solicit comments because we're going to be gone for 5 weeks. So I'm just going to say it's been a fun ride. We'll see you in a few weeks. Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year. We'll probably be back by Groundhog Day. So just thanks for hanging out with us, everybody, and we'll see you later. That's it for this episode of the Geek Rant.
Bye.
All right.
It worked.
It was a little long, but I didn't feel like cutting it off.
No, it was good. I hope it wasn't too preachy. I don't think it was. I'll try to be as positive as I can with this stuff.
Thanks, Jinda. Glad to have your feedback with us.
Jinda.
Always a breath of fresh air.
Yep, absolutely.
All right,
Alrighty,
YouTube people, I'm cutting off the stream. We'll talk to you later. Bye now.